President Mnangagwa says his government has noted with concern the resurgence of the parallel exchange market and government is taking action. His remarks follow the recent devaluation of the Zimbabwe gold currency by the central bank. The ZiG now trades at 25 against the greenback, up from 14, while the black market offers higher premiums.
We note with concern the resurgence of parallel market activities driven by speculative tendencies. Corrective measures are being instituted to protect all Zimbabweans from economic disruptions. Together, let us lay a solid foundation for economic prosperity, peaceful development, and freedom from undue external interference.
As Zimbabwe battles the El Nino-induced drought, President Mnangagwa says ensuring food security and adequate water provision is top of his government's priority. To date, government has distributed nearly 70,000 tons of grain countrywide as part of measures to plug food shortages. With a record 600,000 metric tons of winter wheat harvest projected, Zimbabwe is confident of fending off effects of the drought.
Water harvesting remains critical to climate change mitigation and adaptation towards complementing rain-fed production systems. The full utilization of small dams and wells, as well as conveyancing around the bigger dams, is top priority to my administration. The Rural Infrastructure Development Agency has scaled up assistance to communities with tillage activities as the summer farming season draws closer.
The Zimbabwean leader also gave assurance that the power situation will improve soon as his government is awaiting to commission several projects by independent power producers.
National power supplies remain subdued, partly due to low generation at the Kariba power station. Improvements are expected from the pending commissioning of several projects by independent power producers.
The second session of the 10th Parliament is expected to pass new legislation such as the Teaching Professions Bill, the Civil Aviation Bill, and the Private and Voluntary Organizations Bill. Sharon Munjenjema for ZTN News at Parliament.
Staying with the State of Nation address, we are now joined live to discuss this by Zimpepa's Group Political Editor, Ranga Mataire. Ranga, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us right here on News Plus. Now, what are some of the key takeaways and the general theme of the President's address?
In terms of the key takeaways from the President's address, I think he was on point in highlighting issues and challenges that are obtaining in the country. One, you mentioned about the media reforms, you mentioned about the liberalization of airways, you mentioned about the new, radio stations, and this is being done in order to entrench democracy and also to ensure that information dissemination reaches to all corners of the country. So in terms of media reforms, I think the President was on point. Then there was also the issue of the health sector. He highlighted issues in that, and the education sector as well, highlighting the reforms that have taken place and the benefits thereof in terms of the innovation hubs at the universities. But you also mentioned about huge investments coming through the mining sector. And the mining sector is critical. As you are aware, the President also mentioned that our currency will continue being anchored on our mineral rich resources. So I think in terms of the major takeaways, of course, a lot of people expected something out of the ordinary. They thought that probably this was a policy announcement, but I think this was a legislative agenda that the President had to anchor on. But he also mentioned on the issue of currency and emphasized that the recent RBZ devaluation of ZiG was meant to allow flexibility in terms of foreign exchange through the willing buyer, willing seller, and in that process that there could be price discovery and stabilization.
Now, Ranga, in terms of the legislative agenda, what outstanding bills do you think the second session of the 10th Parliament should really focus on?
You might be aware that the Clerk of Parliament mentioned that this was this Parliament, they had a lot of people who were still learning the ropes, so the process in terms of expediting the bills could have been slowed. But there are at least 18 outstanding bills that need to be processed, and the President expressed concern over the delay in processing of those bills. I'll just mention some of them, the bills that the President was concerned about and that are still needed to be, processed. This includes the Persons with Disabilities Bill, the Administration of Estates Amendment, Civil Aviation Amendment, Death Penalty Abolition, Parks and Wildlife Amendment, Private Voluntary Organization Amendment, Mines and Minerals Amendment Act Bill. All these bills are necessary, including the Zimbabwe Schools Examination Council Bill, which is expected to enhance the efficiency and good corporate governance of the ZIMSEC board. If you look at all the bills, they are being put forward in Parliament with the intention of making them into law because they're essential in one, streamlining in terms of aligning with modern trends, modern international standards, but also in terms of aligning with the Constitution. There are other things that are outdated that needs to be revamped. So these are critical bills that the President has mentioned, and this will form the business of Parliament.
So now, Ranga, the President also spoke on the need for media reforms. How critical are they to the country's development agenda?
Media reforms are very critical to the country's development agenda. As you are aware, even today there was a workshop being hosted by the Media Alliance of Zimbabwe, where the issue of the media was being discussed in terms of how the media is evolving and changing in terms of incorporation artificial intelligence in the world dissemination. So in terms of development, media is very critical. It is very critical. If you open up airways, if you liberalize airways, you ensure that there is access to information by almost everyone. And there is no way that you can institute development if there is no access to information. Even the recent move by government to ensure that Starlink is operating in this country is also part of those reforms to ensure accessibility of information. Without information, you cannot navigate through the vagaries of the world. So I think it is critical that he clearly mentioned media as a critical cog in terms of development.
Well, thank you, Ranga, for joining us. Now, let us look at some of the main highlights from the President's address.
Konapo Konapo, Ipapo, Bazetian Prime, DSTV channel 294, the place to be.